We've never been incentivized to be in our bodies.
Mhm.
It's the whole Dionysian Apollo dilemma. We have this well-boundaried, well-figured man who's out there doing the man thing. And then there's this other man that's very androgynous, that's got maybe rolls of fat and is just engorging themselves on grapes and indulging in everything that comes with nature's bounty. Like, ooh, that sounds gross. We don't value this sort of just oozing with like some sort of naturalist phenomenon that maybe came to you through a walk in the woods or standing under a waterfall and picking fresh fruit off of a tree or just trying to eat some flowers or berries from a bush. Like, ugh, who said that was okay to do?
In a world moving faster than our minds were designed to handle, mental health is becoming one of the defining challenges of our time. Welcome to Mental Health in a Modern World with holistic health practitioner Greg Schmaus. After overcoming severe anxiety and OCD in his own life, Greg dedicated the past decade to helping others heal through a fully integrated approach to mental health, combining lifestyle coaching, psycho-emotional healing, mindfulness, and archetypal work. Over the years, he's facilitated thousands of sessions, guiding people back to peace, clarity, and a deeper connection with themselves. Each week, Greg shares powerful solo insights, conversations with leading voices in holistic healing, and immersive live coaching sessions that take you inside the healing process itself. New episodes every Friday. Follow the show and start reclaiming sovereignty over your mind in a modern world. Here's Greg.
Nathan, welcome to the podcast, man.
Good to see you again, Greg. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I was so excited to see you on one of Hamilton's calls a few weeks back.
Yeah, Hamilton, what a guy. Yeah, I don't want to say he took me under his wing because in essence, we're all kind of under his wing. He's like kind of speaking to the world. But I had like a little epiphany, you could call it, with actually the help of Jason Picard. He took me through a Bufo experience, and it was a very small, like relative to what I've done in the past with psychedelics. It was a relatively like brief, quote unquote easy sort of thing, but the set and setting were just so that I felt like love pouring in. And there was all this like religious iconography, which is not typically my jam, but it's a part of Jason's journey. Anyways, for those who don't know, Jason Picard, he has this great program called Abundance Archetype. Everybody should check it out because he's a really interesting cat. But he's a friend of mine, and we did this experience, and I remember leaving feeling like this message, like you need to learn from plants. You need to sit with plants. And I wasn't using plant medicines. I was using Toad 5-MeO. And am I supposed to be doing something with this? And I thought maybe that means I'm supposed to be doing herbalist work or whatever. And then it was like, no, it's not that. It's the thing that maybe I haven't been avoiding. It was like the tool that is hard to harness as a tool. It's not learning what an herb does or a plant does. It's you need to go deeper and sit with these master allies, these mushrooms and ayahuasca. And that's exactly where it led me. So I have a lot of, credit to do to provide back to Jason that the first person I called was Hamilton. And Hamilton Souther is he wouldn't use this word, but he's a shaman living in Peru. He's a medico vegetalista, which is what I'm training to be now. And I called him up because I was like, I'm getting this calling, man. I think it's time. And he was like, yeah, you've probably always been getting that calling. And it was just a matter of time before you kind of situated in that. And so I'm a Western medical doctor trained to do surgery and pharmaceuticals and all this other stuff. And what I kind of rounding out my understanding of that calling is that there's just certain things that you can't do. A lot of things you can't do with the Western medical approach. There's a lot of things you can do I couldn't do in these strange worlds of birth and death, which is where I focused all my medical training. And he was like, well, let's get to work. And that's how, I get invited to those calls that you get, that you're sitting with. And I'd be curious, Greg, are you also looking to do more work and maybe start facilitating that? Is that your journey too?
Yeah, I started, Paul Chek was my first introduction to psychedelics and plant medicine work. And a few years ago, I started assisting our mutual friend Payam's ceremonies.
Oh, yeah.
So I had been assisting for about 3 or 4 years his ceremonies. And last year, he and I were facilitating together a small men's group. And one of my clients who sat with us in that ceremony had a few years back sat with Hamilton. And he mentioned it that weekend. And when we were in ceremony, I just got that intuition that I need
Mm.
to study with Hamilton. And so I had reached out to Hamilton, had a conversation with him, and he said, "Look, if you want to join the academy, like, I'd love to have you." And it was just a full yes. Earlier this year, I started that journey, and it's really been beautiful. Really taking
Totally.
some of the principles of his teachings and working with sanctuary and a lot of his offerings and bringing that into the ceremony work that I was assisting in, but now moving into kind of a different role. For me, psilocybin has been my greatest teacher.
Same.
For me, that's the medicine that when I work with it, it's just such a beautiful relationship of learning, of discovering. There's, for me, just so much humility that I feel when I'm sitting with those teachers. And just the wisdom that pours in for me is just invaluable. And my work has been a lot of mental health and working with the psyche and working in the archetypal realm. And psilocybin has really connected so many dots that otherwise were missing. Um, and
Yeah.
so, yeah, I'd love to hear your journey in that realm as well.
Yeah, I mean, you and I are very similar in that regard, where there's a deep humility to the work as well, where it's like, gosh,
Mhm.
I'm going to start doing this now. Like, and you have your whole, all of the programs you've developed, you've been focusing on doing this a certain way. And then I don't know if this is true for you, but for me, it's like you hit a point where it's like, I can't go any further here. I need to find some other path. Like, it's like walking up a stream on a trail and you have to cross a river. And it's like there's nowhere to go unless I go backwards, which sometimes we do, and we look for other trails, and those get us just so far, and then we eventually have to cross this like bubbling, you know, raging rapids is sometimes
Mm,
what it seems like. And the questions I had are like, where do babies come from? Like, what is birth? What is death? Where do we go? Where do we come from? And this mental health stuff it's just crippling our society.
mhm,
And sure, it's a societal issue. It's not like a deficiency in psilocybin or psilocin or DMT or whatever. However, however, when you start to have those experiences and you start deepening your relationship, I love that you use that word with the plants, they start to pull back layers of this veil that is very thin for me right now. So much so that some of the insights I'm getting through these journeys are like directly practical things that I
mhm,
then try and they work. So I don't think that there's like necessarily a right or wrong way for me to go about this. It's just a full send, surrender, leaping into the waters and then treading for a while instead of grabbing onto a rock for dear life, just letting the current just take me downstream. And maybe there's a trailhead down there, maybe there isn't. But I know I'm a strong swimmer. I can get out of the river at any time. And it's also kind of like knowing like, hey, this is controlled. Like this I don't want to say it's a simulation, but like when you're in the river, you're not going to die. Not with these medicines. There's a part of you that might be left behind, but that's stuff that maybe I didn't need to carry as baggage anyway. So there's these strange allegories that come through and for me that I I sort of made an agreement with myself that every 2 to 3 weeks I would do a deep dive with psilocybin and that
mm,
I nourish my own mushrooms. I have access to all of that. I set up an altar. You do the sage, you do all the things, and then you have a conversation with the mushrooms and you set some intentions and that initially was very hard. It was like 4 months maybe of just going through my own stuff. And that's what people call like a bad trip, where, you take 3.5 grams or something and you're just rolling around, kind of crying, maybe you're reaching out for something. And there's just this desperation feeling. It was never really quite a desperation for me, but a lot of people feel that. So I'm just saying that to reflect that back to people. Like it's not easy work. But what was interesting, and this is where the actual like facilitator process comes in, is that at some point it was like, I'm tired of going through the stuff like from my childhood. I'm tired of going through this weird dance that my mom and I do, or the past stuff with my dad, who he's since passed away. So there's no resolution to that, anyways. I would literally start the ceremony by talking to the mushrooms, like out loud, and saying, "Hey, I want to see your playful side," Or, hey, I want to know, I'm doing this now. Like I'm in here, I'm with you. I need to know what you want me to, how you want me to comport myself in order to be able to offer this medicine in a safe environment for other people. And then they show you, like the council of mushrooms or
Mhm.
whatever it
Mhm.
is. And that's a really neat thing, isn't it, Greg? Where you like actually can get like a direct response at times.
I'm glad you brought this up because one of the experiences that I've had until working with Hamilton is I always entered ceremony with medicines just open to whatever they had to share. And a lot of times it would go back to childhood, it would go back to emotional processing and stuff like in my system that still needed to be worked through. And I get that.
Yeah. Yeah.
But then hearing from Hamilton, where it's like, you can tell them what you want. It's like, hey, I want to work on this, or I want to focus on this, or I want answers
Right.
to this.
Right.
And there was so much more almost like spiritual agency
Mhm.
that you are allowed to bring to the relationship that now for me, I feel so much more empowered going into the ceremony, like I am stepping into a relationship. And yeah, this is what I would like to get out of it. And as long as it's in integrity, they will participate in that. I love that. Like now you're not just getting thrown around the tide, so to speak, of consciousness. You're able to really use intention and create that relationship with more sovereignty.
Yeah. Yeah. There's really no control here. It's more of a setting up the the path. And then when you're in, you have to let go and just go down the path. You've
Yeah.
asked for the path. And so if you go in thinking, I don't want to do this, I don't want to do this, you might be unintentionally setting a path that you really don't want to have. And that's what I think the fear piece that Hamilton actually speaks quite a bit about. Like, what are you afraid of? I'm
Mm-hmm.
afraid of having a bad time. Well, buckle up, buckaroo. But if you're actually afraid of, maybe you're not afraid. Maybe you go in and you're like, I'm really excited to learn to meet a new ally, like a new spirit animal or
Hmm.
something, which has happened to me now several times. And I document it in my journal and I draw them and I like there's these strange figures. He's like, oh yeah, I want to know all the allies, Hamilton. He's like, there's like infinite number of these little things that are a part of, I think they're little slivers of our own psyche that emerge and then they actually can be used in different ways.
Hmm.
But if you ask the right questions and you set the right intentions and it's all in integrity, it's all authentic. It's not like, hey, mushrooms, like you're not negotiating. They're like, well, like we're not going to, first off, they're not going to give you more than you can handle,
Hmm.
which kind of draws into my sort of consciousness or my awareness, this notion that like God doesn't give you more than you can, can carry or whatever. I'm not a Christian, but there's that essence. And I do wonder if a lot of those ideas came out of, some of these
Hmm.
psychedelic experiences back in the day. And
Hmm.
we won't get into like, what's that guy's name? The immortality key guy,
Yeah, yeah,
you know, that the original Eucharist was maybe a psychedelic
yeah.
something. I mean, there's very compelling reasons, I think, for us to believe that because what you can see here is the veil starts to thin. You're no longer you. Greg's no longer Greg. We're in some other space, and you have an infinite, unlimited, I should say,
Mm.
range of opportunity there to ask the right questions, even in the ceremony. You can get clarification on things. And so the work of working with Hamilton, now I'm honing those skills. And even in offering ceremonies to others, which I've started to do, but very, very humbly. I don't charge money for it. It's like for a really good friend's 50th birthday, I just did something for him.
Mhm.
And you then also start to pick up on even a low dose of mushrooms, like, I don't know, maybe like 2 grams or something. And they're on like a 3.5, 4 gram dose or something. I have my full composure, but I'm still feeling like, whoa, that veil is really thin right now. And you start to
Mhm.
get a feeling like, huh, we need more copal over here, or we need a different type of music, or we need to shake some rattles, or we need to maybe play something on the charango. Like there's all these other elements where you actually start to be able to move and play with that energy. And then they come out and they're like, I don't know what you were doing, but that was amazing. And it doesn't seem like you're doing anything. You're just intuitively kind of feeling your way through the space, not just randomly making noise or randomly doing this or that. You start to actually pick up on like, I think we need this. And then you try it and you feel something move away from them. It's really, really beautiful. So that's the journey right now, Greg, is every couple weeks,
Mhm.
heavier and heavier doses. We call these meso doses, like a 4 gram dose. It's not more than 5 or 6, which is when you
Mhm.
get into like I'm melting into the floor land.
Mhm.
But there's enough there where I'm like, I have to lay down and I have to like really kind of compose myself because it is a bit of a treacherous, you know,
Yeah.
uplifting there. And then you go for as long as you need to go and then you reconcile it, you start journaling it, and then you improve.
Yeah.
There was one other thing I'll say is that these direct practical things that are coming through now are quite interesting because deep inside of me, let's say I have a deep longing or a deep yearning to help my wife with a problem. And then like an implement will come through and then
Mhm.
I will try it and it will work. Like something locked up in her pelvis or something like that, using a rattle to this particular song at this cadence after wrapping her belly with like a postpartum, like a cotton wrap, around her abdomen, really, really tight. The mushrooms will say directly, like, you need to help her come back together, come back to center.
Mhm.
And that sounds like a bunch of woo woo, whatever kind of stuff. But they're like, if you do it this way, it'll help her come back to center. And we try it and it works. So my wife had like this really, really bad back pain, and it was probably related to iliopsoas tightness, which is a big muscle that runs from your lower back down to your like mid thigh, and it helps flex your knee towards your chest, and it's a part of the hip flexors as we call them. And after having babies, I think this has been like a tightness for her. And
Mhm.
you could look at it as a pelvic issue, you could look at it as a musculoskeletal issue alone. These muscles oftentimes are the place where a lot of emotional stuff gets stored up. It's a very emotionally sensitive part of our body, the pelvis,
Mhm.
which is the second chakra. It's the root chakra. It's like this whole, even the solar plexus is involved here. And so in your work, I'm sure, I mean, this is like a big part of what you do. So we've got all this emotional stuff tied up based on stories we've told ourselves, based on things other people have imprinted into our own energetic bodies and into our minds and in our souls at that level. And so you could go to the PT and they'll do some work, and the acupuncturist, they'll do some work. You could get some hydration and electrolytes, magnesium breakthrough, like whatever it is, and that may help. But
Mhm.
what's actually going on in here? And so when I was given this message, I said, let me try this. And I laid her down and I immediately took this rattle and I was told, put it halfway between the heart and the uterus and just press there. And then at this point in the song, it like even told me, pick up the rattle at this point in the song. You're going to go bam, 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 like on that spot. And immediately my wife, well, afterwards, she said, when you put the rattle there, it was a tender spot. She's like, I don't know why I would have pain there. It doesn't make any sense to me, but it was like,
Mhm.
ooh. And there
Mhm.
was a bit of an emotional release just from having the rattle in that spot. And then we're going up and down, up and down, up and down at this particular cadence. It's this beautiful Peruvian, I wish I knew her name, but this Peruvian charangista, this little charango, this Andean
Mhm.
guitar. And she's playing this song. It's like 8 minutes long. And the whole time I'm rattling. Ch-ch, 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 ch-ch. And she said there was this crazy emotional release during it. And it could be, my skeptical mind is, it could be that her husband, who loves her so much, is just taking time to
Mhm.
care for her. That's a part of it. But there was also, she said, a very physical something happening just by having the rattle in that spot. And the second time we did it, it was like overly sensitive. So I had to just like kind of roll the rattle on her belly. The reason I'm saying all this is that I don't know if we have a mechanism that explains why that worked, but it did work.
Mhm.
And now it's on us to say, well, if it worked, let's try to reproduce that. And
Mhm.
if that then becomes a tool that I've learned in less than a year of really deep, intensive study on this, so to speak, experiential study on this, then you can imagine how somebody who grows up, let's say in the Amazon, right? I'm not comparing myself to a shaman, but a small child who's sort of been gifted with some extrasensory perceptibilities in the Amazon, is raised with ayahuasca, for example.
Mhm.
And they're just learning these things. Like they're just getting told the jungle has this to offer, and there's this plant, and there's this way of being, and there's this way of eating. You just develop all of these tools over maybe 60 years, and then you're a 70-year-old quote shaman, and you just know what to do. Like,
Mhm.
oh, Greg has this issue. Let's do this thing. Oh, that didn't work. Well, in my experience, then we do this thing after that, and maybe that will help resolve it. And maybe you need to come back again. But you can imagine how over so many years of studying medicine and surgery, you learn all the tools. Well, if you study this and experience this for so many years, you broaden a toolkit that is very dissimilar to what we learn in the Western sciences, so to speak, but it's just as scientific. It's empirical. And through oral tradition, many of these people were saying, hey, you don't even need to experience it. I know this other tool. And then,
Mhm.
well, I have this tool and you have that tool, and they're all exchanging this information. That to me is so much more interesting and exciting than what I had been doing for most of my 20s and 30s.
Yeah.
I'll stop there.
No, it was really beautiful what you were sharing, and it's so resonant with one of my experiences over the last few years, stepping into an assisting and co-facilitating role is taking, like you said, like 1, 2, let's say grams of psilocybin and stepping into that role as facilitator. There's this intelligence that's within you that's now just directing you, and it's like, "Oh," like, it's like I know exactly what needs to be done. I don't know how I know this, but I know I need to put my hand here, I need to use my breath this way, I need to use this rattle in this way, I need to place a little Palo Santo right here and press on this part of the body, and all of a sudden, it's like I'm just being guided, I'm being moved in a way that I
Moved.
have
Mm.
never felt like or experienced before, and, even, like, working on people's bodies, because I was a massage therapist for a long time, and working on people's bodies with psilocybin was just a whole 'nother experience of being moved to how the body needed to receive therapeutic touch, and it was such a profound experience the initial few times where you were just, like, receiving instruction, and you were
Yeah.
just moving accordingly, and I asked the medicine once, I'm like, "This is really profound, like, how can I really apply this and integrate this outside of ceremony?" And the message I received is, "You're already doing it, you just don't fully trust it." And it
Right. That's it.
removed the barrier of mistrust in myself and in my own intuition. And it was almost like this idea of like unconscious competence of like, let me show you what you're already doing but aren't aware of it. And let's remove the barrier of mistrust. And now like the channels are open.
Yeah.
And it
Yeah.
was really, really beautiful to come to that awareness.
It, it kind of sounds like growing up,
Yeah.
in like the opposite direction though, because like kids, y- you've got a bunch of stepchildren, correct?
Mhm.
4, maybe?
3.
3, okay. Yeah, and when you see these little kids, they're not trying to perform for themselves or anybody else. They're literally just letting their bodies and minds be guided by something. And there is some fancy there. It's not just that they're seeing real things and that they see the grid and we don't. I mean, maybe babies. I don't know. Who knows? Doesn't really matter. But they haven't yet. The point here is that they haven't yet been conditioned to do things based on somebody else's expectations.
Mhm, mhm.
So if you were to, I mean, pretty much every level of our society, there's like an instruction book imposed upon you, and you're conditioned to read that instruction book for everything from paying taxes to whatever, navigating civil responsibility to, I don't know, tending a garden. What's your yard supposed to look like? You're supposed to have short grass. You're not supposed to have an edible forest in your front yard. That goes against the whatever city regulations or so there's this like myriad of things that tell you not to trust yourself is kind of the
Mhm.
point. And in my work in birth, this is like a big part of what you have to work on families with. And I still don't have a clear answer for people, but there's no right way to have a baby and there's no right way to die either. And for many women, we beat these drums. We're like, you need to stand up for yourself and advocate for yourself. And meanwhile, they've had maybe 33 years of listening to somebody else to approve of how they're living their lives or what they're, agreeing to, they're consenting to, or what they're declining. And then you add to that layers of community whereby you don't want to become excommunicated because you did things differently. We saw this happen during COVID. People are just not used to listening to their own internal compass. And to harp on the parenting thing again, I read this book by Alfie Kohn called, I think it's called Unconditional Parenting. And he makes this point. His whole thesis in this book is that when we guide children, especially at these young, ripe ages, to do the things that we want them to do using a risk reward system, we're basically telling them you have to fawn for the affection of superiors
Mm.
in order to not only be valuable, but also in order to survive.
Mm.
So cast out your own internal sort of moral compass of good and right and wrong. Do it this way and you'll be okay. And so we see that in the path to becoming a doctor. Like the doctors are such compliant people. They have been so good at saying yes, sir, and yes, ma'am, their whole life that when you get to the point where you want them to change their practices or you want them to maybe open their minds to home birth or something, it's just not possible.
Mm.
They don't even have a framework. Even if there is a little something, a little glimmer of like, maybe that is a good idea. They've been so conditioned to look to other authority figures as a means of finding guidance for how to do their job or to live their life.
Yeah. Yeah.
And when you're in these mushrooms and you start getting this stuff coming through, I agree with you. It's sort of like, are the trees always that green? Like I even feel like we have like our senses are dulled because it's too exciting to see the woods and hear the power of nature. So let's just like condense it down into this very pinpoint lived experience.
Mhm.
Now, how do we trust that like those insights that you're getting are true or not? I don't know, and I don't really care.
Yeah.
If it works for Greg and it feels right to Greg, maybe we should honor that Greg intuitively feels like this is the right way to go. You know what? I actually need to go this way.
Mhm.
But Greg is being told go that way. And Greg, go for it, man. Go for it. Do that thing. Or receive that medicine or I don't know. Bend over and smell that flower. Something really good's going to happen. And we do this to little kids, going back to the kids. We have places to go. You can't be doing that. You can't be doing this. And they might be exploring like pollen for the first time on, some flower that's in the garden. So something guided them there. Like, let them do that. There's some reason that they're smelling this flower. And it's not just to learn about pistils and stamens. It's that there's something there that is moving them towards doing this thing. And we've gotten so caught up here, the biohacking space, the
Mhm.
doctors of all types. It's not just the MDs, it's the
Mhm.
NDs, it's the chiropractors. Everybody's so caught up here because they want to
Mhm.
create that new viral reel and that new marketing scheme that's going to get them a little extra business or help them outshine the others. When we really need to be dropping into here, this is where
Mhm.
all of those feelings come from. And we've never been incentivized, Greg, you know this is better than anybody. We've never been incentivized to be in our bodies.
Mhm.
It's the whole Dionysian Apollo dilemma. We have this well-boundaried, well-figured man who's out there doing the man thing. And then there's this other man that's very androgynous, that's got maybe rolls of fat and is just engorging themselves on grapes and indulging in everything that comes with nature's bounty. Like, ooh, that sounds gross. We need this. We need
Mhm.
regimented, articulated intelligence, not this other thing, which is also intelligence. We
Mhm.
just don't value it. We
Yeah.
don't value this sort of just oozing with like some sort of naturalist phenomenon that maybe came to you through a walk in the woods or standing under a waterfall, which we just did at Havasupai Falls, or
Mhm.
going and picking fresh fruit off of a tree, or just trying to eat some flowers or berries from a bush. Like, ugh, who said that was okay to do? Right. So, anyways, I'll stop there again.
It's
We're
beautiful, absolutely beautiful, and what was coming up for me as you're sharing is just the filter that societal, familial conditioning creates over reality, and how over time we see a narrower and narrower and narrower lens of perception, and how, from my experience, what these medicines do is they give you a moment of removing the filter. And I know we talked a little bit
hmm,
about what we're learning, like we're learning all these incredible new things, but I think it's more of a remembering. We're more remembering the things that we
yes.
implicitly knew but forgot because of the filter. And so I feel as though these medicines are helping us remember the things we forgot rather than learning something new. One thing I'm really curious about is because so much of your work, really your entire professional career has been around the two most important transitions And you could say ceremonies, which is the entrance and the exit, the
Yeah.
arrival and the departure. And so I would love to hear how your work with these plants has begun to shape or reshape your work with those two ends of the human experience.
It's validating in some ways, and in other ways, has made it far more confusing. I'm still desperately looking for some answer to where babies come from, and yet there's
Mm-hmm.
like little hints of it when you're in these ceremonies. So ayahuasca is interesting. It's different from psilocybin, and so
Mm-hmm.
yeah, let me relate to ayahuasca for a second. I hadn't ever used ayahuasca or sat with ayahuasca for all the years that everybody's been talking about psychedelics. It just was never a calling for me. It was never like a hell yes. So I
Mm-hmm.
was invited. It was always like, do you want to do this? Maybe I should pursue it. And it was never really there. And then as soon as I had met Hamilton, my wife actually had already signed me up for an ayahuasca retreat because I was like, you know what, I think I'm ready. And then the epiphany with Jason came, and then I talked to Hamilton. And was like, it's funny, I'm going to sit with ayahuasca in a couple months when I, had kind of started this training. So I went down to Costa Rica, and you take a big cup and then you take more. And then like when you take more, it's like you go over the edge and some weird stuff starts really happening. I don't even know if I would have needed to go the extra cup. But at one point, I mean, I'll give you this example. And this actually does tie into even Rudolf Steiner's kind of worldview. And actually, what's funny is the story I'm about to tell. There was a signal that came through that said Steiner was right,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't know if that was me telling myself that or if it was from the council, the ayahuasca council in this case. But
Mm-hmm.
at least about this thing, Steiner was right. So I entered a direct dialogue with, I don't know, people would say God, and I'm not sure if that word is suitable because it doesn't really matter what you call it. There's this access to literally everything.
Mm-hmm.
And in the dialogue, it was like there was this new model of how life is created. And it was a very passive process, almost that like the universe or nature can't help it. And I don't have this model yet dialed in, but since you asked about the birth thing, if everything is being created passively, and I have a story about becoming a plant as well, which actually validates a little bit of this, but it was told to me, okay, imagine that there's like a creative impulse. It's almost like a sky hook being dragged, and it's just bound to pick up something on its way. Like
Mm-hmm.
it's bound to pick up something. What is it going to pick up? It's going to pick up a song, which is this feminine property in the universe. And then that song is going to be molded. And if you want to look at like staffs of musical notes, this is not only the notes, but also how the cadence, how that music was going up and down the scale, maybe the bars, like all of that boundary making is the masculine. And with the feminine, you get the song. With the masculine, you actually get the musicality of it. And and yet there's a creative impulse that's kind of pushing this forward. And so when you get the masculine and feminine rolling around, you end up with this product which has masculine and feminine qualities, and we call it music. So I'm still working on that model and how the feminine, like a female body in the womb space, this center of life force energy, the uterus, how this actually plays in. But I don't think it's any different from what happens when new stars are formed in the sky, in the cosmos, whatever. And so I don't know if I was fully like when I took the second cup. This is just one of the ayahuasca experiences. There was a one cup. I got this interesting little, like literally on a whiteboard, Greg. It was pretty wild. And then I took the second cup, and the voice went away, and then something more came through, and I became a plant. And in the jungles down there in the tropics, there's so much noise. There's so much growth happening, and the council was like, "This is what it feels like to be a plant." And it was like being stretched in every direction. Every cell or whatever. I don't really believe that there are cells until you're dead, but this living protoplasm, this thing that is Nathan, I could feel every bit of myself vibrating and being pulled in some direction. They were like, do you see like how connected the plants are? Like we have been here for so long and you guys come in, you're brand new here. The animals were here first, and then the humans came, and you guys are pretty special because you're the youngest ones here, and you
Mhm.
haven't yet learned how to cooperate with nature. You are
Mhm.
not separate from, you are a part of this. And when you learn that, everything else will change. Your entire worldview of how this story that we've told as humans being the shepherd of planet Earth, that's nonsense. We're like the babies. They're taking care of us and just making sure that our mistakes are corrected and we're guided in some way or the other. And so we can get into like environmentalism and everything. Was sort of like, yeah, you poison the stream and the frogs, they call back their population. And then other organisms go in and clean up the stream and then the frogs come back. Like we're all in this together. You guys don't have that much power. You're babies and you're knocking over blocks and we're
Mhm.
just picking them up. That was kind of the message. The reason that those two things connected was it was even like you can't break a branch off and expect that we're going to even notice because we are constantly creating. There is an impulse to create every moment of every day for time memoriam. There is creation happening everywhere from the subatomic all the way up to the cosmic. And you guys feel so important. You guys feel like everything you do is so relevant. And it is relevant, but it's not the whole story. Like, we're not here juggling whatever humans put out there. We're trying to just keep you guys from killing yourselves.
Mhm.
And if you do kill yourselves, that's fine. You'll be back. Like that's just how this process works. So feeling that passive creation process for me really drew into quite a bit of what I would regard as probably a part of what's become pre and perinatal psychology. I'm not sure how
Mhm.
familiar you are with that, but Stan Groff, Tom Verney, they were just describing what a baby might remember while in
Mhm.
the womb or before coming into the womb, and then pontificating based on observations for children that develop into adults with various what we call mental health disorders, even anxiety and depression and an unwillingness to work on hard problems, like all of this stuff, struggling in school, in other words,
Mhm.
all of this stuff they were able to associate with not only how were the babies conceived, but how the babies came into the world.
Mhm.
And many people are remembering what happened in the womb. We're not supposed to remember that or what happened before they were in the womb.
Mhm.
And we get into the spirit babies conversation. So all of these really abstract themes started coming together. And then when I started having these experiences with some of the plant medicines, including mushrooms, it
Mhm.
wasn't just ayahuasca. It was like, oh, maybe babies and mothers do choose each other. That's fine, maybe. But what's more important here is there is a passive creation process. There's this impulse to procreate that is not really in our control.
Mhm.
And if birth is not in our control, then death is can't be in our control either. Because when one door closes, one door opens. I don't know which one's first, doesn't really matter. We're talking about the immaterial or the material. But there's this magical thing that is happening where we get for a little whiff of time, like a little blink, we get to be in this physical form. And whatever happens afterwards is fine. There's going to be this creative impulse for not us, like me, maybe to be reincarnated, but some essence of me to be reincarnated because essence just isn't destroyed. And when people say you come back as a butterfly, it's not like Nathan's going to have wings and be like, oh my God, this is great. There's some essence of Nathan in the butterfly, which is why when your father passes away and you're getting visited by cardinals, maybe there is something to that. I don't know. What's most important, Greg, and then I'll shut up for a few minutes, is that many of the Eastern mystics and the Eastern philosophies have seemed to have been kind of on board with this for many, 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 many centuries. And so, since our, whatever you want to call it, the age of enlightenment, this sort of age of this scientism, this thing, if it's not measurable, it's not important. That, of all things, is just not useful to me anymore.
Mhm.
It's useful if you chop off your arm and I need to put it back on or something. It's not go to a different type of doctor. That's not me. But anyways, I'll just pause there. I'm sure there's a lot coming up for you.
Well, it's really, really beautiful. And actually, what was coming up for me was before we got on to recording, we were talking about the darkness.
Yeah.
And
Mm.
my time in the darkness was so much about going back into the womb and going back into what felt more like a cosmic womb. And I would say by day 3 in there, started to really tap into this creative energy of the cosmos and how the real intention and the real kind of basis of the cosmos is creation. We're here to create, we're creative beings. And how much our Western culture and modern society has turned us into consumptive beings,
Yeah.
and how the whole model of consumerism has disconnected us from our own divinity, because our own divinity is creation.
Mhm.
And coming out of the darkness, all I wanted to do was create. I didn't want to consume, I wanted to create. And now integrating back into modern society,
Hmm.
I see how strong that gravitational pull into consumption is, and how much that disconnects us from our connection to source. And so really just a beautiful reminder of that deep, deep desire to create. And that being I think what is called the will pleasure of God, which is creation.
Can I add something?
Please
In
go
that,
for
yeah, you had mentioned before we started recording, you mentioned there was a deep feminine, or you alluded to it here too, this
it.
deep feminine quality to being in the darkness.
Yeah.
And we brought up like or not sleep deprivation, sensory deprivation tanks,
Hmm.
and how like profound it can be. And people are talking about the magnesium and this and that. Like, no, it is really neat to just not have any sensory input,
Hmm.
except for maybe like a little bit of a water feeling, like I'm a little wet. But even that kind of goes away in the tank. I haven't done the darkness retreat yet, but I'm leaving tomorrow for Aspen for this. And what you shared about this feminine quality in this sort of impulse to create, which I also had experienced so deeply in in Costa Rica, it actually really pays. It should turn our attention to not just the importance of creating life, but to creation in and of itself. And the fact that you had said that it was a deeply feminine property really draws into question a lot of the feminist notions of like what's important about women. And so I'm not going to go down that path too far, but there is a feminist author named Camille Paglia. I don't know if you've heard of her before.
No, I haven't.
She wrote a book that you would really love, what I know about your work. It's called Sexual Personae. It's like
Mm.
36 hours on Audible. It's a big book. It's actually quite dry too. You take it in small sips, but her whole thesis is that most of what we see in civilization is due to men's desire to try to show that they can be creative too.
Mm.
And so there's a line, I think it's from her book, but maybe it was somebody paraphrasing her work, but they had said something like, there will never be a female Shakespeare for the same reason there will never be a female Jack the Ripper. Women
Mm.
don't have to do spectacular things in order for their magic to be known.
Mm.
And when we say magic, we're not talking about mystic. We're talking about magic tricks. There is a magic trick that a woman can do in creating a human being inside of her.
Mhm.
That is practical magic happening in front of your eyes, which is what drew me into this work to begin with. The mystical is more of the intuitive kind of feeling your way through and getting the insights from here and there. Like that's really, really great too. And it doesn't discount or it's not exclusive to magic, but without even trying, a woman can create life. And now I'm not saying it's not an effort and all that. Like that's not what I'm saying. It is an impulse that when it gets picked up and it's maybe facilitated by something from the man and something from the woman meeting, that's all fine and dandy. But men can't do that. And if you imagine like years and years and years ago that you see this magic trick happening, what can men do that's even comparable to that? We can write the greatest poetry. We can come up with incredible literary works that survive 600 years. We can build bridges and skyscrapers and bank accounts and whatever, bit blockchain. We can do all of this really cool shit, and most of it is done by men. Does that mean that women are not competent? No, it's because men are trying their very best to show that they're also a little magical.
Mm-hmm.
And whether you think that's magic or not, it's not really the point. Women are gifted this. And so why would women have the impulse to create skyscrapers? They have the ultimate impulse inside of them at all times. There's something really beautiful, Greg, about what you said about being in the womb, where you actually get to feel that again. And maybe men also have this, but they haven't ever been incentivized or rewarded for tuning into it. And maybe we never will have it, and we shouldn't have it. But it certainly does bring into reverence our relationship to the feminine. This incredible, and I wouldn't even say it's just the feminine, it's the impulse that happens to live inside of women and
Yeah.
not men. At least this time around, I don't have that impulse. So the whole Jack the Ripper thing is and whatnot is an interesting allegory, because it's like we men do these incredibly big, sometimes terrible things
Mm-hmm.
because we want the world to know that we are special too, and women don't have to prove that to anybody.
Yeah.
So when we get into archetypes and we get into all this type of stuff, it's like the story of Iron John and all of that. It's quite interesting that like women kind of just like can just brush it aside. My wife is a great example of this. Like, I don't need to do an Ironman triathlon.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a fucking woman. I give birth.
Yeah,
She's
we're
far more Dionysian than Apollonian, which is so interesting.
yeah, we're in this desperate search for our own innate sense of value.
Yeah, men are
Men,
specifically.
men,
Yeah,
yeah. Women
yeah.
have that built in, and it's
Mm,
just it's right there. And I could see how us men can become overly ambitious, overly performative, overly in pursuit of this, which can become this externalized sense of value in the world, which I do think archetypally also goes back to our experience of our father. But I was actually in a ceremony 2 days ago with our friend Payam and with a small group of men. And I was working with this young man, beautiful young man, on his innate sense of value
hmm,
and how a lot of it gets externalized. And we were all in medicine together. And all of a sudden, this bee flew into my awareness. So, this
hmm,
beautiful bee, and the bee flew into his root chakra.
hmm,
And the bee said to me, "Speak these words to him. Root your value in your being." And how a lot of times when we
hmm,
externalize our value, we become the bee that leaves our center, that leaves our our root and goes and tries to pollinate a million different flowers,
mm,
trying to prove its value. But the bee said, come back to your root and root your value in your own being. And it was a beautiful play on words.
yeah, totally. The bee
Yeah.
being.
Yeah. And the other piece that was coming through in that moment was also when we're trying to pursue this externalized sense of value, we're trying to search for our sense of belonging.
Mm,
And the bee also said, remove the longing and root in being. And you have that word belonging. And it was so poetic and so simple and so beautiful. And that's what I love about the medicine is when spirit is speaking, it's not complex. When spirit is speaking, it's simple. But
mhm.
in its simplicity, it carries so much power and almost a poetic nature to it. And I find also we as humans, we love to complicate things.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, but just the simplicity of what the bee spirit, or what I perceived as the consciousness of the bee, and what it had to offer in terms of our innate sense of being and value and rooting in that was really a beautiful moment for myself too, just as a
Mhm,
man, as a
mhm.
masculine being.
Yeah, I just shared with one of our men at Born Free Method. We have this is like my pregnancy, fertility, pregnancy, postpartum parenting support program, and we have a men's group that meets every couple of weeks. And I had just shared there was like a little prompt somebody had put in the Telegram thread, and I said, it was basically like, what was the prompt? I don't know. My response was, I'm not sure at what point I'm going to be okay with feeling like I don't have to be relevant.
Mhm.
And we use all these excuses for why we need to do more things or make more money or, I don't know, post again on Instagram or whatever. And it shared like it's a little bit of an insecurity for me because it's like, like, do I have to be 65 and the world just stops looking at me because I'm now an older person that I
Mhm.
have to get comfortable with being like less relevant? Or it's not so much that I want more, Greg. It's like, shouldn't I be wanting more? Shouldn't I be doing
Mhm.
more? It's that thing that nags so much of us and so many of us. And what came to mind for me when you were speaking is that, people want to go into this like pathway to ascension. They're going to
Mhm.
live in an ashram for so many years and then suddenly it'll work. What came to mind when I was hearing you speak about the belonging thing, that piece is so beautiful. And you're right, so simple, but man, can you unpack that? I'm going to be chewing on that for my whole flight tomorrow to Aspen. So thank you for that little gift. What came to mind was this guy, Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche. You heard of this
Mhm.
guy?
Mhm.
Yeah, so his whole story, for those who know, is he was, selected very early on in Tibetan in Tibet as, he's going to be a lama. This is going to be like a big deal, and he did. He came into the robes and lived that life, and then, of course, in this is like at the time of the civil rights movements and Vietnam protests and the, Summer of Love, like that whole thing was happening in the United States. Probably a very exciting time, but also very confronting for society. And he was like, I'm going to go to the United States. And I'm creating this story myself, but he did go to the United States and he left his robes there and he was received a lot of criticism. But I imagine it was like, if I believe all of this stuff, I should be able to go into the heart of the beast and see the delusion and see the temptation, and I should be able to work through it. And he self imploded. But what's interesting about what he would say and the way he went about it is that some of his closest followers thought he actually did it intentionally in order to prove a point.
Mhm.
Like he died of alcoholism at 47. That's like how his story ends.
Mhm.
But the people he was teaching were people like Pema Chodron, and Ram Dass was one of his students. I mean, like this was a big not name person who doesn't get a ton of credit because he quote imploded or
Mhm.
he caved and he wasn't living it out. And there's a story where he is holding a beer on stage. He's so drunk that he like can't even make words. And then he drops the beer and he looks at the audience and says, like, oh, accidents happen, and then he just starts getting so like uh, belligerent that staff comes and carries him off the stage. And while he's seemingly passed out, he looks at one of them and opens his eyes and it says, "How did I do?" And then closes his eyes, smiles, and like gets carried off. So there's something funny about this guy where it was like he wanted to push it as far as he could, and he did. And then he fell apart. That the falling apart was almost like the ultimate lesson he could have given to his students.
Mhm.
And whether or not he did it intentionally is like, I don't know, maybe I'm romanticizing it, but there's a lot of people there in his circles that felt like he was trying to get people to reflect on their own stuff.
Mhm.
What are we going to do about the violence out in Vietnam, man? Well, I want to talk about the violence in this room. It's another quote from
Mhm.
him. And so what he was doing is showing everybody a big giant mirror and saying, look at who you are. And there's another story where he throws everybody's weed. Bring your best weed. We're going to go to the new temple. And he throws it all into the fire and talks about self delusion. So complicated character, this Chogyam Trungpa. But the question of like, we're on the linear path to ascension. He would say, if you're asking that question, you're already on the wrong path because there
Mhm.
is no path to ascension. There is only right here, right now. What is going on?
Mhm.
And it has nothing to do with what you're being told to focus on in the media or on Instagram or on this podcast. You're missing the point if you're looking for the answers externally to who and where you should be going.
Yeah.
And what's so interesting about what you had said about this bee experience is that I actually feel like all of these psychedelic medicines, they're actually becoming this new renaissance of psychedelics was actually perpetuated by the plants.
Mhm.
They actually want us to succeed because if we don't, there's going to be a whole bunch of other stuff happening ecologically and everything else in the world. And they want us to be, they're like, well, let's try teaching them in this way. And then you have these direct experiences, and people are like, well, it was your imagination. I'm like, yes, it was my imagination. And Jung would say that was very, very helpful to be able to articulate what I experienced. It's not fanciful like children. Samuel Coleridge distinguishes between imagination and fancy. It's not just fancy. There's something real that happened for you in that be and that message that came through. It's up to you now to take it, be present with it. And that actually is the path to ascension, whatever ascension actually even means. Because it certainly isn't just being a monk in robes in Tibet.
Yeah.
I think that there's more to it than that, even though that's what the New Age movement wants us to believe. There's actually something so deeply unique in the unique genius that's expressed by Greg Schmaus or Nathan Riley or your wife, my wife, like my children, your children. Like there's something really unique there. And I'd mentioned Steiner before. Steiner, this is everything that he teaches, is like there is nothing more than you in this moment. And if you want the world to get better, if you want your stuff to get better, you have to be willing to just be. And that's where I think the darkness is going to be the most challenging, going back to that.
Yeah, beautiful. And when you were just sharing that, I was once again taken back into the darkness. And I went into the darkness with one question. And it was a question that was posed to me by a shaman that I've worked with for many years. And the question was, what is my original frequency? That was the question.
My original frequency
What
before
is, I didn't have more than
Yeah.
just those words. What is my original frequency? And I spent 4 days with that question.
Hmm.
And on the last day, I felt like I touched it. And it wasn't something that I could put into words or describe, but it was a feeling. It was a sensation. It was an experience within myself. And the reason I bring this up is when you were talking about where do babies come from, and you were mentioning this idea of a song,
Hmm.
and song being music and music being frequency. And that each person coming into this incarnation, into this dimension with their own song, with their own music, with their own tone, with their own frequency. And so that was a big moment for me of
Hmm.
really feeling now going forwards from the darkness. When am I in my original frequency? What am I doing? What's the environment that I am in? Who am I with? What am I experiencing when I feel as though I'm touching that original frequency? And that was a huge moment for me.
Wow. That's beautiful, Greg. Keep
And
going. I'm like staring out the window, just letting my imagination, my like kind of heart run with that. That's really
yeah,
nice.
a few days later, when I came out of the darkness and I was just in meditation, and I asked, what else is there for me to know about my original frequency? And I just had a vision of a deer.
Hmm.
And when I went into ceremony after that, one of the things that was coming through is that the deer as an animal is the animal that most closely matches my original frequency.
Do you feel that
And
to be true? Yeah.
yeah.
Hmm.
And so the deer as an ally has been one of my greatest teachers. So much so that I was
Wow.
recently sitting and I was in a deep process. And when you're either in medicine or a deep practice, and the body releases through shaking. A lot of times, whether it's like in your
Mhm.
abdomen or your extremities, a lot of shaking. It's a big practice in Qigong. And I was in this process of shaking and releasing, and I opened my eyes, and 20 feet in front of me, there was a deer staring right at me in the eyes, and it was shaking with me. And it started taking its front right leg, is it leg or yeah, and started pounding it and making this almost like there was like an aggression, like a little like anger.
Hmm.
It's kind of like a power move. And I actually stood up and backed away. And in that moment, when I stood up and backed away, I started laughing because I got the teaching. And the deer was like, "You're afraid of your own power. I'm mirroring you back to you, and you're trying to retreat away from me."
Oh, Greg,
And I just laughed and I sat back down
it's a heck
and I
of a.
said, "Thank you for the teaching." And a few minutes later, the deer just walked away. And so it just, a lot of dots connect when you make yourself available. And that's the last thing on my monologue that I will say is I feel as though what the medicine offers, what going into ceremony offers, but even just going into the darkness or in silence, what we're doing is we're making ourselves available. We're available for spirit. We're available for guidance. And living in a world with weapons of mass distraction, people are not available. And so that's a big thing for me is when it comes to spirit, I'm not going to be a moving target anymore.
Yeah.
I'm going to be available by sitting still and giving spirit an easy target to hit. And it just comes through availability. And so that has been the last thing that I would say has been a huge, huge message for me is how available are you? And it's inversely proportional to how distracted you are. And I'll pause there.
Hmm. Yeah, what's probably most fresh and I'm kind of moving through me right now is I think a lot of people probably listening to your podcast, a lot of people that come to my podcast, even a lot of people that go to our favorite, our mutual friends podcasts are looking for some answers. And it's so easy to market a new device or a new,
Mhm.
even like a new program, like a new step, follow these steps and you'll get better at this thing. Even the idea of taking medicine, like plant medicine, it's all like rooted so deeply in materialism. So what's coming to me is like we're all like harping on the right nutrients and the right food, and fish oil is good for you, and then it's not good for you, and then Sheila J is good for you, and then it's not good for you, and then peptides. It's just like so boring and uninspiring.
Mhm.
And yet, you just shared some really profound insights that require nothing external.
Yeah.
It's not even measurable. In fact, it might even be laughable because of the way that society views those types of shares. I mean, you have to be careful. You don't just start sharing that with somebody on an airplane, right? Because they're probably going to scooch over a little bit and think you're a total weirdo. And yet, somehow, going back to what you had said about remembering, it feels like probably like, oh, that's right. This is who I am.
Mhm.
And like, man, there isn't a comparable amount of therapy or gadgets or supplements that could get Greg to feel like that. And so, what I'm not saying is we're doing it wrong. What I'm saying is everybody has their own path. And I actually think that the weapons of mass distraction have also preyed on our need to have for somebody else to have an answer for us.
Mhm.
Don't pay attention. Don't go inward. Don't spend too much time sitting and contemplating or not contemplating and just being. Edmund Knighton always brings up the fact that like you can't go anywhere on the earth and it's quiet. And what most people hear is there's airplanes or there's cars or whatever. There's so much civilization. Civilization's not the problem. If you go into the woods, there's a lot of civilization there. It's not human civilization, but there's
Mhm.
nowhere, even in the dead of winter, that it's completely silent. There's something there to be heard. And you've just been told that whatever you're hearing isn't relevant to you. It's not a part of
Mhm.
you. But man, once you become available for spirit, those little things, you call them coincidences if you want. It doesn't really matter to me. But those little things start to emerge. We're like, there's always a white butterfly around. What is going on with this white butterfly or moth or whatever? This is where I feel like people who are just spending more time outside without their headphones on. They're just out there being bored, if you want to call it that, in their garden, in the woods. In Havasupai Falls, we were just hiking there. Like, you have no cell service. You're just talking. Maybe you're not talking. You're just hearing the dirt under your boots. There's something really spiritual about that, which is maybe why the Japanese prescribe forest bathing or something.
Mhm.
But when you're really honest with yourself, there's so much out there, and it's scary as hell to start hearing the jungle or hearing the forest or hearing the stream, because there's something that I think is we attune to that is a remembering of that power that you
Yeah.
described. And I think many of us are so happy to outsource that power because we don't know how to harness that power.
Mhm.
It's really scary to be a man and to know how big and strong you are at times. And yet, like, the strongest people I know, Kyle Kingsbury is a great example. He knows how to harness that strength. Like, he would
Mhm.
never hurt me or you or his wife or his kids. But God, he could rip my freaking head off
Mhm.
without even, batting an eye. He's just big, strong, incredibly just muscly guy. So we become so afraid of being who we are that we outsource even our identity to somebody else. Tell me who I am, who I'm supposed to be. Because if I was to really be who I am, maybe it's not a deer, maybe it's I don't know, a python. I don't know. I don't. That's pretty darn scary. It's pretty darn scary to have this like I'm gonna just do what feels right now. I want to do whatever is calling to me at this moment because the world expects you to be something that maybe you don't even feel is intuitively in alignment with who you are.
Yeah.
That deer story is great.
Beautiful. When you were talking about the omegas and the shilajit and the peptides, I was recently starting to outline a new course on addiction.
Mm,
And I was just kind of sitting and contemplating how I was going with it. And I realized that the word addiction is one letter off from the word addition.
mm,
It's the word addition with a C. And I was like, oh, addiction is just a perpetual coping through addition. Every addiction is just adding something, adding something, adding something, more of something, more of something. And we're conditioned to always believe in our culture that if something's off, add something. If something doesn't feel right, add something. But what we're talking about is a perpetual process of subtraction. Darkness is the ultimate subtraction.
mm.
It's the ultimate removal of everything that's getting in the way of that availability that we were just speaking of. So, really, so grateful for this conversation.
We gotta meet up in person at some point. Maybe it'll be through Pium, but I've really loved this. This has been like a really, really nice time just to reconnect and to be curious together. That's all that it is. There's no answers. I don't
Yeah.
think we came to a single conclusion about anything, about the world, about ourselves.
Yeah.
But there's some comfort sort of mutually in being aware of how aware we can be
Mhm.
and the sort of curiosities that arise when you're just a little bit more aware. I think that is something we can conclude that we can agree on. And it opens up a can of worms for the next 50 years that we're here,
Hmm.
maybe as to like, when is it enough? Like, I don't know. And maybe it doesn't have to be anything more than it is now. And everything I do from this point forward could just be becoming more aware and more present,
Mm.
more still and more grounded. Maybe that's enough. Maybe that's where we're headed. Nobody's going to advertise that on Instagram. That's not marketable into a Netflix show or
Mhm.
not going to make me more money necessarily, or maybe it will. But that sounds really nice. It sounds
Yeah.
really nice to be doing more of this with you.
Same here. Any closing remarks, insights, contemplations, anything that's present for you, just that you might want to leave our listeners with? I mean, they have plenty to chew on, that's for sure. I just want to check in and see if there's anything.
Yeah. Excuse me. Mm. I I haven't really talked about why I think that the medical vegetalista route is appropriate for me. But what I will say in my final remarks is that there are a variety of things that arise in this procreation process, this thing about having kids and raising your family. And when you become a parent, it's very isolating. It's very lonely. And we have all these psychiatric disorders, you know, we call them postpartum mood disorders, everything from postpartum psychosis to postpartum depression. And then there's naturally a traumatic element of childbirth. And so these are the big areas that matter the most to families, and yet we don't have answers for them. We just say go speak to social worker, maybe go to a pelvic floor physical therapist or whatever. But what we're really lacking is in society is like real community around the magic of bringing children into the world. And so much so that women are expected to not only have kids, but then go back to work in so many months and still make money and still look, you know, beautiful and still do all the things. Like we all know this stuff. And so without society changing, I think it's very, very hard for women and families to do well in the postpartum space. That's a given. Having said that, I think that we have quite a bit of tools, or I shouldn't say we, people who are working with psychedelics have far broader toolkits that could be very useful, not only for families getting into their bodies, this sort of embodiment work and working through that stuff, maybe before, during, or after having a baby. And I mean that, maybe even during. Maybe you're on ayahuasca or mushrooms during your birth. Like that's not maybe for me or for you or for anybody else, but I am open to that possibility because giving birth into a world that feels like a sick society doesn't feel like what most people really, really
Mhm.
want. There seems to be something we're missing. And it's not just less vaccines and all this other boring, low hanging fruit. It's our society needs to shift its perspective here. But then we also have birth workers who are coming in and they're indoctrinated into a system of control. And many of them want so badly to peel out of that, but we're stuck up here and we need to get into here. And that's where I think these plant medicines actually are the most useful. And if I was most honest with myself, I am not useful or valuable to society as a person who does surgery or prescribes pharmaceuticals or whatever, does procedures, does biopsies. There's plenty of people doing that. What I think everything that we've talked about here, I think that some of these technologies, if I can call them that, that where they're not being utilized and maybe where they can best be utilized is actually in the birth space with
Mm.
doulas, OBGYNs, midwives, birth workers of all sorts, and families in order to help them remember who they are, help them become reinfatuated with the living essence of whatever it is that comes up in the darkness, with stillness, with solitude, with groundedness, with nothing but sunlight on your skin. And so that's where I'm headed. Those are closing remarks in order to preface maybe the many chapters that are to come. But I do think, Greg, that what you're doing and what I hear you speaking to, it's refining itself into a really, really fun sandbox where we can go deeper into these conversations and we can maybe humbly just say, I don't know. Let's as a community kind of work on this together. And if you don't have a means of nudging you out of these sort of oppressive systems of control, which they all are, and we get a lot of benefit from control. Like there's no doubt that we have money and we have streets and we have clean water because of society. But we're also missing out on the opportunity to remember that we're not separate from, we're a part of
Mm.
nature. And the plant medicines can help just nudge us just at 1 degree off of what we think is normal in order to appreciate that maybe this is abnormal. And if we're going to build something together and become cooperative contributors of our larger ecosystem, of the cosmos, whatever, that we have to start somewhere. And I think in this birth space, I think that's a really right place for us to just validate that something doesn't feel all that right. And that maybe drifting over here and jumping into the waters could be could be really, really cool. Very
Mm.
refreshing.
Mm. Beautiful. So, Nathan, I just want to thank you for what's rising up in me is for bringing the sacred
Mm,
back into the two most important ceremonies that all humans go through.
yeah. Thank you, Greg. Yeah.
Where can people find you? They'd like to learn more, connect with you, work with you.
Oh, just send me an email. Nathan@belovedholistics.com. I got too many websites and other things, but if you send me an email, I do all of my own. I don't have an assistant. I'm just a dude with kids and a great wife. Nathan@belovedholistics.com is my email. Just start there.
Beautiful. Nathan, thanks again for coming on the show.
Thank you, Greg. It was a real pleasure. Thank you.
Beautiful.